Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the 2021 Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble. I am Danny Miller alongside Andy Rubarczyk. As always, Andy, it's been a couple weeks since the Thrilling 32 selection show where we unveiled our devious scheme of the Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble. An old friend of ours made an appearance there at the beginning and, sort of took over the show and has turned the Thrilling 32 upside down, turned it on its head, if you will. And, the format isn't the only thing changing, Andy, because we're going to change it up with the presentation of how we reveal what rides are moving on as well here, Andy. So what do you say? Do you want to explain what we're going to do here over the next couple weeks?
Yeah, so absolutely. So like when you guys are filling out your forms, there's two different rounds here kind of where you can earn points. But at the end of the day, that's not how a Royal Rumble works. That's not how a Coaster Rumble works. So what we're going to do here tonight is we're going to focus just on the wood coasters. I know, Snorefest 2021 right now, wood coasters up. So we're going to focus on the wood coasters and we're going to reveal the groups of 4 that made it in and then also their rankings. So technically, the first 2 parts of your form we're going to reveal tonight for just the wood coasters. And then next week, we'll reveal the steel coasters first 2 parts. And then we'll have a traditional Final Four show and then a traditional championship show, the winner of the Rumble, where we'll also reveal the rankings and such. It gives us a little bit more to talk about, I think, a little bit more to look at here and focus exclusively on just wood and steel and kind of make it feel more like what coasters are going over that top rope and being eliminated very quickly here.
Yeah, and like you said, it'll give us a little bit more to talk about, and it'll sort of keep us in context a little bit, right? Because part of the problem with the way that we had done things in past years is, you kind of we did round 1 for both wood and steel. And then a week later we did round 2 and you kind of had to think back a little bit to what had happened the previous week. So with this, we're going to do battle. We're going to do the whole Coaster Rumble for each group and get right down to the Final Four participant in each of the groups, at least in the wood side, the wood bracket this week, and then the steel bracket next week. And then, like you said, we'll do our traditional Final Four and championship shows. And we'll be able to break it up because we're going to reveal it in stages, right? So we'll get from our 8 down to 4. Maybe we'll talk about it for a minute or two. And then we'll reveal starting with number 4 all the way up to the group winner, which ride is coming out on top in the group. So that's kind of how we're going to do this here. And we'll have some discussion mixed in with all of that. So, Andy, what do you say we start?
Let's get to the first group, the GCI group, right?
That's right. Let's get to the getting here. So we had the GCI group, a group of 8 coasters from Great Coasters International here. And we mentioned this on the selection show, how many of these rides have historically been right in like the top 10 to 15. There were, maybe 4, 5, 6 candidates that you could have here, and then maybe a couple that you would write off right away. Did you have any thoughts here before we reveal our first 4?
Nothing. I think it's gonna be this one's gonna be interesting to see because there's some question marks where I don't think your top picks were that difficult, but I think once you got to that 3 and 4 pick of which ones are gonna move on, I think that's where it became real difficult. I'm interested to see what happens here.
All right, yeah. So, in alphabetical order, we'll reveal this first round in alphabetical order, like you saw them in the slides during the selection show. So, moving on through the first round into the second round from the GCI group is Gold Striker from California's Great America, Mystic Timbers from Kings Island, Troy from Toverland, and Wodan Timber Coaster from Europa Park. So those are the 4 rides moving on to the second round here in the GCI group. So that eliminates Jorist and Adrock, it eliminates Prowler, it eliminates Renegade, and eliminates Thunderhead. Andy, I know you're sad to see Prowler go.
Well, that's actually the biggest shock here, I think, is that Prowler tossed over the top early on.
Prowler's still not getting the love. And I mean, Prowler was number 29 last year. Prowler, for what you and I both love Prowler, especially the night rides on Prowler. And Prowler, for whatever reason, in the Thrilling 32 has just not gotten the love that some of these other rides have.
And it comes to me as a real shock because, you know, when I rode Mystic Timbers, and here you have that's what's interesting here is you have these groups now done by manufacturers, so we can now comparatively look at that. That's the other great thing about doing it like the way that we paired these is we can compare manufacturers and actually look at, you know, sometimes in the brackets that gets lost. That aspect gets lost. But here you can clearly see what the 4 top rides are for GCI. And to put Prowler not in that list is a bit of a shock to me, considering that I kind of rank it right there with Mystic Timbers, that I go back and forth all the time. Is Mystic Timbers better? Is Prowler better? I go back and forth with it. So that's really a big surprise. You know, just generally year after year, it's not a surprise here. It's just a year after year. It's why is Prowler not getting the love?
No, I agree. And you know, I'll share this with you since we know that they're knocked out, but Prowler actually ranked last in this entire group of 8 this year in the Thrilling 32. Just by crazy. 1 spot. But it's very weird. So you know, it's interesting. The coaster that was number 4 here, which we'll reveal in just a moment, the coaster that was 5th, only 2 spots behind it. So this was extremely close for these 4 spots here. So now that we've got down to our 4, Gold Striker, Mystic Timbers, Troy, and Wodan Timber Coaster, how do you think this is going to kind of play out here in the ranking?
Well, you know, this also looking at previous years, you know, do things change? Like Troy was always up there. You know, Wodan, I'm trying to look, what was Wodan last year?
So I've got last year's rankings up here.
Oh, awesome.
So we talked about this in the selection show. If you go off of last year, Gold Striker was number 8, Troy was number 10, Mystic Timbers was 12, and Wodan was 13. So from 8 to 13, we had all 4 of these rides right there. So these could be in any order, pretty much.
Yeah, they really could be. I don't know.
You seem stumped.
Well, you know, the problem is I haven't been on Troy, I haven't been on Wodan, and I've been on Gold Striker. I'm not a huge fan of Gold Striker.
Yeah, you're not a Gold Striker guy.
So and I know that's always done better than Mystic Timbers. I think Mystic Timbers is a fantastic wood coaster. That's always been. I think Mystic Timbers has always been a little underranked in our poll. Last year it was at 12. You said.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Mystic Timbers ought to be a top 10 ride.
Like I think that's low for Mystic Timbers. I really do. And so like that's what makes this is especially difficult for me, having not been on half the coasters and knowing that my opinion of Mystic Timbers versus Gold Striker is vastly different than the voting pool.
No, that's a fair statement, because you're not the Gold Striker guy and I am the Gold Striker guy. So
God knows why. I don't know. You like big, slow GCIs apparently, because you like Thunderhead too. So.
Well, I do like Thunderhead, not as much as Gold Striker, but you know what? I'm bringing up last year's brackets as well. This just occurred to me as we were talking here. Gold Striker was actually a Final 4 ride last year,
and really that was because of favorable matchups, because it was ranked 8, so.
It was, yeah. So it'd be interesting to see.
So once again, Gold Striker. You know what? Hold on. Hold on a second. I think Danny Miller is doing creative bracketing and creative grouping here so that Gold Striker all of a sudden makes it into the Final Four every year.
No, because if I were doing that, it would be Phoenix getting into the Final Four every year, and El Toro wouldn't be in at all.
Oh, true.
We'll see how those play out in a moment. So are you ready for the rankings here in the GCI group and find out who's moving on to the Final Four?
Well, look at that.
Uh-oh.
No change in the rankings, right?
No change. So at fourth, we've got Wodan Timber Coaster. In third, we've got Troy at Toverland. At number two, we've got Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. And moving on to the Final Four, we've got Gold Striker from California's Great America. So actually, Mystic Timbers and Troy flip-flopping from last year. Troy was number 10 and Mystic Timbers was number 12. So Mystic Timber, now we don't know if one's moved up or the other's moved down, but they have flip-flops. So Mystic Timbers beating out Troy this year, but only good for second place. Gold Striker, again, as you sort of alluded to, Gold Striker moving on to the Final Four here this year. Gold Striker is the winner of the GCI group here in the Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble.
Okay, yeah. Very questionable.
Is it though?
Yes.
I mean, if you follow the history, this one was difficult. But
no, I'm not saying picking Gold Striker is going on to the Final Four was difficult. I'm just saying it going to the Final Four is questionable.
Well, hey, I didn't make the groups. Oh wait, yes, I did.
No, yes, you did. Now I'm beginning to think you made the brackets too, but that's a separate story for a separate time. Let's move on to the Gravity group.
Yeah, let's move on to the Gravity group. So remember, the Gravity group was Boulder Dash, Lake Compounce, Ghost Rider from Knott's Berry Farm, The Legend and Raven from Holiday World. The Voyage was also in there. Ravine Flyer 2 from Waldemere, Shivering Timbers from Michigan's Adventure, Tremors from Silverwood, and like I mentioned, The Voyage. So there's a couple former champs in here between Voyage and Boulder Dash. Obviously, Voyage, the defending champion. And one of the things we talked about during the selection show here was where Ghost Rider was going to fall here, because Ghost Rider has slowly been making that climb up the rankings. It moved up to 17 last year, which in my opinion is still too low for Ghost Rider, still far too low. I would say by at least half a dozen places, at least. For Ghost Rider, but it's slowly been climbing. So it's going to be interesting to see where this kind of falls, because Ravine Flyer has always been in that mid to low teens. Shivering Timbers has been right around that 15 to 20 mark, as has Legend and Raven. I think Voyage and Boulder Dash were sort of the givens here, and then you had to pick between 5 for your other two spots.
Honestly, I think Voyage and Boulder Dash, like you said, but then I think your real pick here was between Ravine Flyer and Shivering Timbers. I think I'm not sure that I would question Ghost Rider going on in the 4 based on where it was last year, and based on what this is now. I think it's easy to say Legend, Raven, Tremors, those 3 are gone. And I think your pick here becomes a Ravine Flyer versus Shivering Timbers matchup. And I could see that going either way. Even though when you look at the rankings, Shivering Timbers last year is 21, Ravine Flyer 18. We know a lot of people went on new trips. Michigan's Adventure, though, they didn't open up all year, right? Did they open up? Or they opened up just the water park?
Right, that's correct.
So no one new really rode Shivering Timbers. So, did Waldemere open up at all? I think they did.
Yeah, because I think Brad and Mike actually went there.
Yeah, so
and I remember during the selection show, they knew that they were particularly going to have a hard time with this because they really enjoyed Ravine Flyer, and Mike being the Michigan guy, was certainly conflicted here. I don't know offhand which one he ended up picking, or if he had them both going through, maybe.
Yeah, I would tend to favor Ravine Flyer over Shivering Timbers just because of ridership and because Ravine Flyer I feel like Ravine Flyer's been dropping a lot, like since the very beginning of this. Ravine Flyer used to be in the top 5, right? Like top 10.
It was, you know, 7, 8. It was knocking on the top 5 back before we had more voters. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's the big choice is Shivering Timbers versus Ravine Flyer. And I would probably give the edge to Ravine Flyer just because it was open and people could ride it, which was another whole aspect that I think people really had to take into consideration when filling out what picks they have. But I wonder how many people actually did that.
Yeah, right. No, that's a good point. So the 4 coasters moving on to the second round in the gravity group are Boulder Dash from Lake Compounds, Ghost Rider from Knott's Berry Farm getting through, Ravine Flyer 2 from Waldemere is moving through, and the Voyage from Holiday World is still alive, the defending champion. So that knocks out Legend from Holiday World, Raven from Holiday World, Shivering Timbers
over the top rope they go,
and Tremors from Silverwood out of the ring.
That's out of the ring. Gone. Goodbye. Maybe next year.
That's right. Yeah, and that certainly that Ravine Flyer Shivering Timbers was certainly the biggest thing here. You know, we'll see exactly where those rides ended up ranking relative to one another in the final championship show when we reveal the full top 50 rankings, but it is Ravine Flyer moving on.
And now ranking these 4 should not come to be that difficult, I would think, right? Like ranking.
No, I would think that Voyage and Boulder Dash, I think those were the easy 2. Those are the shoe-ins. They're defending champions, perennial top 10 rides, perennial top 5 rides, really. You know, Boulder Dash has had a little bit of a slip here, but it's been right there. You know, I think Ghost Rider, if you went back multiple years and looked at the trends, Ghost Rider was an easy 3rd pick, in my opinion. That should have been one that you saw coming. If you wrote off Ghost Rider and went with Ravine Flyer and Shivering Timbers, you haven't been paying attention to that Ghost Rider trend. And I don't know how you wouldn't have caught that, because we've been talking about that for 3 years. We've been saying that for years.
But now ranking once again, so we have that issue of Ghost Rider Ravine Flyer back to back last year. Ghost Rider was not open this year. So like, did that hurt it? I don't know. Like that,
so
it being so close, I don't know if that's going to come into a factor. Like them being back to back, if it was like, you know, Ghost Rider is like 6 spots behind them, it not being open, I think that would factor in more. Be like, okay, well, Ghost Rider is not moving anywhere.
Right.
But man, I don't know here.
Well, yeah, and if you were to go off of last year's rankings, you would have Voyage 1, Boulder Dash 2, Ghost Rider 3, and Ravine Flyer 4. But again, those 2 right next to each other. Ghost Rider not opening. We know a bunch of new people who went on some road trips, went to Ravine Flyer. So, you know, does it move up? Does it move down? Does it stay the same? It's hard to tell. And again, with the changing voting pool, it's possible that we got new voters who have been on Ghost Rider, and they affect it. So just because the ride didn't open doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stand pat, because we might have pulled in some new voters as well. So let's have a look at the ranking for the gravity group here. In 4th is Ravine Flyer 2. In 3rd is Ghost Rider. In second is Boulder Dash, and coming in 1st, no surprise, and advancing to the final 4 is the Voyage from Holiday World. So the Voyage is our gravity group champion here in the Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble, and boy, that Ghost Rider Ravine Flyer matchup there. I mean, that's 4 points right there.
Yeah.
That if you, I think Voyage and Boulder Dash was an easy 1-2 here. And then the Ghost Rider Ravine Flyer, you know, if you had those 2 rides, first of all, it's not a given that you had both of those rides through the first round. But even if you did, that's 4 more points that are on the line here that you either got or didn't get by switching those 2, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I agree that was not an easy pick there. I think having, you know, getting to that last pick and you know, we're going to look at the points, and I think these few little picks here and there, they're going to make a big difference at the end of the day. So
Well, and that's part of our intention was this second round where you're doing the ranking. It's more difficult to do that. We think it's more challenging to do that, and we wanted to change up this format. And this is bringing in some, it's making you do new stuff here, and we believe it's more challenging. It's worth more points, and at the end of the day, the folks who do this ranking stage in the second round, the best, are going to be the ones that ultimately have a chance to win this contest.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so shall we move on to the Inferno group? Let's
Yes.
heat it up a bit here. All right, so remember the Inferno group was Boardwalk Bullet, Akima Boardwalk, Colossus from Hyde Park in Germany, Hades 360 from Mount Olympus, Lightning Rod from Dollywood, Mindblower from Fun Spot Kissimmee, Phoenix from Knoebels, Rampage from Alabama Splash Adventure, and Wildfire from Kolmarden Wildlife Park in Sweden. And this is one unlike the first two groups. Where we were doing a particular manufacturer or style of sorts. This we kind of went off the board with like the logo and the theming. And, I was hoping somebody would catch the fact that El Toro's logo had flames in it, and it wasn't in this group. A couple people did point that out, which is funny. I didn't miss that, but we liked El Toro in the other group a little bit better. But this is an interesting one because all of a sudden that common ground that we had in those first two groups, as far as being from the same manufacturer or approximately the same manufacturer, that's not here anymore. So I feel like there's a couple of obvious ones here, but you don't have that common ground to compare them on.
Well, and honestly here, let's cut the crap here. Picking the four should not be difficult in this group. This may be the most clear cut of all of the groups, that if you look at the history, there are really no question marks here. Phoenix, Rampage, Wildfire, Lightning Rod. Like these four, like combined with these other four that are there, like this should have been fairly easy, right?
It should have been, because the four moving are Lightning Rod from Dollywood, Phoenix from Knoebels, Rampage from Alabama Splash Adventure, and Wildfire from Kolmarden. So we've knocked out Boardwalk Bullet, Colossus, Hades 360, and Mindblower here in the first round.
Even, Rampage was ranked 11 last year, and that's the lowest one. And the next one that you could find is Hades 360 at 19. So like there's no difference there. There's a wide gap between.
Yeah, and I mean Hades 360 was 19, Colossus was 20, Boardwalk Bullet was 24, Mindblower was 28. So I mean there were two
change, but traditionally wood coasters don't change that much.
Well, and it seems like the rankings might have changed, but it's really like there were two subgroups in this group. I mean, this probably.
Ranking these is going to be the real challenge.
Yes,
because ranking these four is not easy at all.
No, not at all. And that's the interesting thing here, because even though there were two obvious subgroups, it only gets you part of the way there now. Whereas having those two obvious subgroups might have been pretty easy based on what the matchups were before. The rankings across those subgroups certainly might have changed. But at least this year, it doesn't seem like they changed significantly to break those groups up, because there were definitely two definitive subgroups in the Inferno group here. So what are your thoughts on the rankings here? I mean, Lightning Rod was number 2 last year, almost number 1 by the slimmest of margins in the history of Thrilling 32 was number 2 last year. But there's a lot of discontent around Lightning Rod. We've been talking about that for a couple years now. Does that come to pass here this year?
Well, I think it's clear that Lightning Rod is your number 1 pick. I think that should have been, okay, Lightning Rod. But then looking at Phoenix, Rampage, Wildfire, like Rampage probably is so last year looking at Rampage, it was 11. Phoenix was 9, Wildfire was 6. So if you went on last year's, it should be Wildfire, Phoenix, Rampage. And, Danny, if you remember last year, I filled out the bracket, and my mistake, if you recall, was picking Phoenix into the Final Four or something like that, or picking Phoenix over something. And I lost a lot of points on Phoenix last year in the bracket, because I always thought Phoenix should be a better coaster. Mm-hmm. We also had a bunch, because Knoebels was open the whole season, correct? Most of it?
Just about. I think they opened in the June time frame.
And we had a bunch of people like that they went to Knoebels, right? Mike and Brad.
Yep.
So they
did. They did.
Phoenix is a fine roller coaster. So the question is Phoenix going to stand pat, or is Wildfire, who was at 6, but you had already stated different places. I don't know if you stated it on the show. I think you stated it in the Patreon chat, that our European ridership, we had just as many voters that went to both Europe and America, but the one subgroup in our voting pool that kind of took a step back was European only voters. Is that correct? That they've never been to America?
Yes, we had more voters who live in the states that have been to Europe and had higher coaster counts, but we had less voters who live in Europe that have lower coaster counts that have not been to the states. So there's two ways you can look at that. You can look at that as, well, the folks who live over there who favor a ride like Wildfire aren't in the pool anymore, but the people who over here have been on more rides who might have a higher influence have also been over there. So there's two ways that can go. And a reminder, really, Wildfire was number 6 last year, but the year before in 2018 was number 3.
But we know that this poll also favors new coasters, that Wildfire started off high, and that what we see over time is that coasters like Wildfire tend to slowly drop backwards. And we're going to see, you guys rode all those European coasters. We're going to see, in another year, how things like Terran do, and how things like Helix do, and how things like, even newer coasters like Twisted Timbers, American coasters, things like
they've dropped off.
Strike. We see them fall backwards more so than jumping up. That over time, we see things like Ghost Rider move up the rankings, but that is not the norm. Maverick move up the rankings. That is not the norm. In this poll, it is more likely that as a new coaster, you start out high and move backwards. Now, we've never seen the fall off of Steel Vengeance. We've seen a slight fall off with Fury, but I think that's more of better coasters opening up than it receiving less votes overall. Things like Banshee started off high, slowly not even in the poll anymore.
Yeah, it's not even in the top 50. I think Banshee, its first year, was in the top 10.
Yes. So when we look at things like Wildfire and things like Untamed, things like Copperhead Strike or Twisted Timbers, that I think it's safe to say they might fall back a little each year. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, we'll see. So let's get to the top 4 ranking here. Coming in 4th is Rampage from Alabama Splash Adventure. In 3rd is Wildfire from Cole Martin. In 2nd is the Phoenix from Knoebels. And moving on to the final 4 as the champion of the Inferno group here in the Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble is Lightning Rod from Dollywood. So, 2 years ago, Wildfire challenged Lightning Rod, was number 3. Just behind Lightning Rod. Last year, it fell off to number 6. Now this year, it's dropped below Phoenix and Lightning Rod. So again, we don't know exactly where all of these rides ranked in the final rankings, but we do know relative to one another, Phoenix has now leapfrogged Wildfire, or Wildfire has taken a step back below Phoenix, one of the two, or maybe it's a little bit of both. But Lightning Rod's moving on to the final 4. Phoenix was number 2 here, Wildfire number 3, and then Rampage. I think, as expected, Rampage coming in at number 4 here, but certainly does not do Rampage justice. A fine ride, Rampage is.
Yeah, made it halfway through.
Well, yeah. So I don't know. There hasn't really been any big surprises here yet so far, have there?
No, and it's and keep in mind that this format's not going to lead to huge surprises either, because it is more logical what we're doing. So it's not just throwing 2 coasters up against each other and you got to figure out, based on previous history and all this other stuff. There's some logic there as well, but I think this leads to more, okay, let's look at what's actually going on here in the poll. That's kind of why we're talking about previous polls. Whereas before with the brackets and stuff, we would talk about previous polls and previous rankings and all that stuff.
It didn't really matter. It was all head to head.
It was all head to head. So, here, like this format leads to us actually talking about the inner workings of the poll more, which I think is different, and we'll see if it's more fun. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So why don't we move on to our final group of the evening, which is this Misfit group that has all of these things that Andy doesn't like, except for Outlaw Run. And it's got the one thing that I don't like. So at any rate, the Misfit group, if you recall, was Balder from Liseberg, the Beast from Kings Island, the Coaster from Peony Playland in Vancouver, Q Cullen from Tato Park in Ireland, El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure, Goliath from Six Flags Great America, Outlaw Run from Silver Dollar City, and Rutschtabanen from Tivoli Gardens in Denmark. And you know, we've got the 4 European rides here. We've got 4 very, very well-known American rides here. And you know, I think a couple things happened. We got really enticed by the Ravine Flyer Shivering Timbers discussion in the selection show. We got enticed by the GCI discussion. We got enticed by the Intamin group and the Steel Bracket, which came right after the reveal of this group. And we talked about all the things that are kind of weird about this group and how just of a hodgepodge mishmash this group is. But what we didn't really talk about is the fact that there's three rides from last year's top 10 in this group.
Danny, top 7, 2 of which are in the top 4. We're in the
so last year
should have been in the final 4. They weren't, but they should have been.
Last year, Outlaw Run number 3, El Toro number 4, and then Coaster number 7.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back to the year before that. Okay, El Toro number 4, Outlaw Run number 5, Coaster number 6 in 2018. Let's go back to 2017 here, shall we? El Toro number 2, Outlaw Run number 5, Coaster number 11. So over the last 3 years, these rides have all been right there, and they're compressing themselves amongst each other.
Yes, very much so. So the first step of this was picking the 4. So this basically came down to a Goliath versus Balder discussion, correct? Goliath and Balder back to back last year, I believe. Goliath was 15, Balder was 16. So
yes, you are right.
Last year's poll, I can't go back further than that, but you're looking at back to back. So once again, a very difficult choice that realistically, you know, you're probably like, oh, who cares if I get it wrong? But getting it wrong also gets you the rankings wrong as well. So that's what makes these, you know, okay, it's easy to select 3, but selecting that 4th has a lot of impact on your overall score.
Right. So again, you know, I'm discovering as we do this show, this is something that I like about this new format. We can actually talk ourselves through how we would be approaching this.
Yeah.
Right. Because, you know, that's the luxury here. So you talked about last year, Goliath was 15, Balder was 16. Now, that was if you just went off of last year's, right?
Yeah.
If you started looking at the previous years,
oh man,
go back to 2018, Balder was number 10 and Goliath was number 13.
So right in the same ballpark.
Right. And again, the relative order of those two flip-flopped. Okay. And then the previous year, if you go back to 2017, Balder number 12, Goliath number 16. So it might have benefited you to not look back further, or maybe it would have benefited you to look back further.
Right? Like it's you got flip-flopping positions. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean it's really, really difficult as far as these go here. And you know, I'm not saying
the situation's not going to help you because Goliath was closed all year and nobody went to Europe. So
well, yeah, that's the thing. And you know, one of the things that I think we need to look at, and you know, we'll see in a moment here if it plays out. But one of the things that I'm interested in seeing, do rides at parks that were attended this year see jumps even if they weren't new, especially rides at the parks that had new rides that did open? So for example, we had Orion open up. So do we see rides like Beast and Mystic Timbers move up or move down? Because certainly, maybe not Beast so much because it's been around for so long, but I'm sure there's voters who went to Kings Island for the first time in, say, 5 years and also rode Mystic Timbers for the first time on top of a ride like Orion. So does Mystic Timbers see a rise or a fall? I mean, we already saw that Mystic Timbers was below Troy last year, and this year it's above Troy. So there might be a residual effect there already that we're seeing come into play.
Well, and you're decked out in your Candemonium gear tonight. So
right, I'm protesting Candemonium, not in the Thrilling 32, yet Skyrush was. I mean, we talked about that on Selection Check.
And you've kind of already said that, will Skyrush see a jump this year because of all these people going to Hershey Park all of a sudden?
Well, and I volunteered the information that I love Candemonium. I still think it's the best ride in the park, but I moved Skyrush up my rankings quite a bit. I discovered
I've not even been on Candemonium. There's no way it's better than Skyrush.
Well, and that's fine. I wouldn't argue with anyone who takes that position, but that's exactly my point. Is
you're like the same person telling me that Orion's the best Giga in like Ohio.
Well, yeah, let's not even get into that. But I think there, and maybe it's not with the Beast, but I think it'll be interesting to see if there is a residual of sorts that's sort of comes to pass here.
Well, I think we'll see that on the final and the championship show more so for this one. Obviously, we've already seen it with Mystic.
Right.
No, Banshee and Diamondback are not in the Thrilling 32, so maybe we'll see it with Beast, Banshee, and Diamondback. We'll see jumps on all of those rides.
Well, and then thinking about Candemonium, since you brought up Hershey Park, I mean, even though it's not in the Thrilling 32, are we going to see a ride like Lightning Racer maybe move up? Because that's historically been at least in the top 50. And, and I know this isn't the Steel Show, but because it's been so volatile with where it actually ranks at the end of the day, is Skyrush. I mean, is Skyrush going to be a ride that benefits from the opening of Candemonium? Yeah. Because again, some of our patrons went on the big road trip, never been to Hershey Park before, and they went this year. So we've got a lot of people who might have done the same thing where we talked about Orion and Mystic Timbers, where they got on other new rides that are at those parks. So let's get back to the the Misfit group here, and moving on to the second round in the Misfit group is the Coaster from Peony Playland, El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure, Goliath from Six Flags Great America, and Outlaw Run from Silver Dollar City. So after all that, I don't think there's a huge surprise here. So it is Goliath that moves on over Balder. I think that was the big question mark here, right? Because
that question mark pales to the question mark that's coming up.
Well, isn't that
the Goliath question mark becomes the only certain answer in the next step?
And that is what I love about the way that this group has played out. Is you had three that I think were pretty much shoo-ins. Rich Shibanen, I will say this. I won't tell you where it ranked yet. We'll find that out in a later show. I was actually surprised with where that placed.
Really?
I was surprised that you'll probably be scratching your head more than I was. But in any event, Goliath and Balder was probably the discussion you need to have with yourself. So now, I think, like you said, that is the only certainty here. Because
pencil that in at 4. There's no question.
Right. So we won't put the slide up yet, but I'll bury the hatchet and say that indeed it is Goliath that's number 4 in this group. So that being said, let's talk about the other 3, because that's the real discussion here.
Well, just looking at last year, like you said, there's not a whole lot to go on. El Toro 4, Coaster 7, what was the Outlaw Run at 3. So
so everybody was asking why El Toro wasn't in the previous region because of the flames. This is why.
This is why. So if you I would personally say that looking at last year, looking at some of the history, you might be able to say Coaster is at 3 based on comparative numbers.
I think that's the right analysis. I think that's the right analysis.
So then it's a toss up between El Toro and Outlaw, and I don't think there's any set of data that's going to give you an answer for that one. I think you can scour the poll as much as you want, but there's nothing that's going to tell you definitively what to do.
So let's work off of that assumption for a minute. Let's work off the assumption that Coaster is 3. Let's just talk about El Toro and Outlaw Run for a minute. And I'm going to go all the way back to when Outlaw Run opened, and I'll tell you which one was higher. So you keep a tally of which one was higher how many times. So last year, Outlaw Run was 3 and El Toro was 4. So Outlaw Run gets 1 there. Okay. In 2018, El Toro was 4, Outlaw Run was 5.
Okay.
So we've got one of each. Okay. In 2017, El Toro was number 2. Outlaw Run was number 5.
Okay.
Okay. 2016, El Toro was number 2. Outlaw Run was number 8. And the significant part of 2016 and Outlaw Run being number 8, that was the year Lightning Rod was opened and won the poll. And we thought that, but if you go back to 2015, Outlaw Run was the champion and El Toro was number 3. Okay. 2014, Outlaw Run number 2, El Toro number 3. And in 2013, Outlaw Run, the champion, and El Toro number 4.
So it depends on if you like recent history or past history better. And trends. So we always talk about look at the trend of where rides are trending. It would seem that El Toro would be your winner here over Outlaw Run if you look at the trend. But then if you look at the past history, if you like the ancient history, then Outlaw Run's your pick. But I would probably side with El Toro and Danny Miller finally crying and seeing El Toro in the Final Four.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing. El Toro has never been lower than 5. I think if I remember what I just rattled off to you, El Toro's never been lower than 5, and I think it was only 5 once. It's never been lower than 4 or 5. Outlaw Run has 2 championships, which El Toro does not have. But Outlaw Run also has that weird 2016 year where it was number 8.
Yeah.
So if you're doing the averages, the 2 Outlaw Run championships offset that 1 year where it had 8. But the problem is those Outlaw Run championships came early in its existence. 2013.
Once again, this poll.
Well, right. 2013 and 2015. Outlaw Run hasn't won since then. Now it's been Voyage for a couple of years here, but El Toro has kind of been right there. And El Toro's always been right there, whereas Outlaw Run has been a little bit more of a shifter, right? I mean, it was right there in 13, 14, 15. It dropped off in 16, and now it's slowly made its way back up, in the top 5 again. And last year, Outlaw Run was back up to number 3. It surpassed El Toro once again. So, is it a trend thing? Is it an average? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is when you do all those different methods. I'm sure, somebody probably figured out what the average ranking for each of them was, but I don't know. So, I would say, we talked about Goliath being at number 4. So let's reveal the other 3 here. In 3rd place in this group is El Toro, Andy.
What?
El Toro is 3rd in the group. Coaster at Peony Playland is number 2, and Outlaw Run is the Misfit Group champion and moving on to the Final Four. So we spoofed everybody, Andy. We spent so much. we worked off the El Toro Outlaw Run assumption. El Toro doesn't even beat out Coaster at Peony this year.
And the only person sad about that is one Jeff Goodman. So.
Well, and you know what? I know that I've gotten a little bit of heckling about Coaster at P&E being so high year after year here, and I explained this. I explained this during the Patreon show, or during the selection show when we were on a chat with our patrons, and they were curious about the whole helix dropping out of the steel altogether. and, the voters, just losing some European voters, did that really make that big of a difference? And, in that case, it might have. But again, like I said, we had more people who live in the States who have been to Europe that voted. So the combination of losing those European voters and gaining more of those States voters who have been to Europe, there's an algorithm there that caused Helix to drop so much. But the fact that Coaster continues to year after year, I think it's safe to say at this point, being higher than El Toro, that Coaster is a top 10 ride yet again. So I think that should speak volumes to how many people, it's not just me and Adam Beard who are influencing this Coaster ranking. There are many, many people who have ridden this ride and have it ranked very highly. To be perfectly candid with you, there's a lot of people who vote in this poll who have Coaster ranked much higher than I do. So if anything, my vote might be hurting the P&E Coaster a little bit here, because I only have it in my top 20. It's not a top 10 ride for me. I do have it higher than El Toro. But at the end of the day, that should speak, the whole Helix thing dropping out should speak volumes to how many people are actually voting for this ride and have it ranked very highly. So it doesn't move on to the final four. That's Outlaw Run. But I think the fact that Coaster is splitting Outlaw Run and El Toro here, and I can't wait to see where these rides ranked amongst each other in the overall rankings here at the end of the day. But I will tell you that they were extremely, extremely close to one another. So now the stage is set for our Wood Final Four, which we will see in 2 weeks. Next week we'll be doing the Steel Rumbles here. But that concludes the Wood Rumbles. So the GCI group, we've got Gold Striker. The Gravity group, we've got the Voyage. The Inferno group, we've got Lightning Rod, and then out of the Misfit group, we've got Outlaw Run. So let's take a look at our final four matchups here. We'll have Gold Striker going up against the Voyage, and we'll have, once again, Lightning Rod and Outlaw Run duking it out here. And Andy, a couple years ago, I made a bold prediction about Outlaw Run and how I thought that people were upset with Lightning Rod. I thought that Outlaw Run was going to have a resurgence, and I predicted Outlaw Run to beat Lightning Rod and move on to the final four because they were in the same region that year.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a prediction again this year, sure to go wrong, that I think this is the year that Outlaw Run outranks Lightning Rod, and I think Outlaw Run will get back to the championship this year.
I got news for you. You're beginning to sound like me predicting dark rides at Cedar Point at this point.
Well, it's like the magician who's on TV who tells you to pick a card from the stat. He's on TV. He's out on the street in the city, and he tells you to pick the card, and he says, "Is that the 7 of diamonds?" And then you do that 100 times. Eventually, you'll be right. Just pick the time that works to show him, right? Yeah. So, I think I'm just going to keep predicting Outlaw Run over Lightning Rod until it happens here. And then I'm going to tell people that I called it once it finally happens. But again, more issues with Lightning Rod this year. It closed early and everything. I don't know. I think maybe this is and again, looking at the trends, Outlaw Run slowly eking its way back up the rankings. I think Outlaw Run's got a legitimate shot this year to knock off Lightning Rod, and who knows, maybe it'll win the damn thing.
And that's going to be the biggest thing to choose there out of that final four, that if you got to this point, if you got this far, choosing, Lightning Rod or Outlaw, or choosing Voyage, Gold Striker should be pretty clear. Like, come on, guys. But choosing Lightning Rod, Outlaw, even
you don't need the recent rankings to figure that one out.
Like, even if you have Lightning Rod and, El Toro there, that we kind of suspected that it might be, even if you had that matchup, that's not an easy matchup to pick either. So could mess up a whole lot of points here if you get if Outlaw Run actually does what you think it's going to do. I think maybe a lot of Lightning Rod fans might be upset there because they're going to really screw up their brackets.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see, we could be, not to bring this up here, but this be sort of a swan song for Lightning Rod because, the whole uncertainty of the transition to steel and, what will people call it?
We as wood because I don't plan on writing it for at least a couple of years. So,
well, we don't even know how we're going to handle it. I think it's going to come down to I'm going to have to go ride Lightning Rod at some point this year and kind of decide, and we'll have to make a decision about how we're going to handle it. And it'd be interesting to get people's feedback once they start to ride the new and hopefully improved lightning rod in 2021 to get people's feedback on what to do with it.
And part of the problem is that people, like, we've never definitively said, do defunct rides count in the Thrilling 32? We've never had to, because the closest thing we've ever come is Dragon Challenge. And Dragon Challenge, by the time it closed, wasn't even really in the Thrilling 32 anymore. So it never really came up. Wild Mouse was in, at Blackpool was in maybe once.
It was in 2017, the year they tore it out, but it operated that year, so it wasn't really an issue. And it hasn't been. And
it's like we've never had the issue of a defunct ride being in the Thrilling 32. So we've never had to. So now we're going to have to cross that bridge probably next year. But that's a question mark for next year, not for this year, Danny. This year the question is, will it get past Outlaw Run and maybe get itself crowned champion in its last year running as a wood coaster definitively?
Okay, so I made my prediction. I think it's Voyage versus Outlaw Run in the finals. I want you to make a prediction on the air.
I have no idea.
Come on.
Let me go back to last year. I'd like to look at.
I'm just asking you to pick who the two finalists are. I'm not asking you to pick a champion yet.
Well, I know who the champion is. I can answer that question for you a lot easier than this.
Well, that's why I'm not asking.
Oh, hell's bells. I don't know. I'm going to say Outlaw Run too. I like Outlaw Run better. I don't know.
I do.
I don't even know what my own ranking is, to be honest with you.
But again, you're not picking your own ranking. Don't make the same mistake. Tell the voters to.
No, I have no idea. So, okay.
All right.
The Rumble for the wood. Next week, like we said, we'll do the Rumble for the steel. Man, this was tough. This was tough already.
This was stressful.
And next week is even tougher. So,
this was the easy week. This was the easy week here.
Oh, I can't even. So, as always, guys, thank you for joining us here on the COASTER-net Coaster Rumble, the Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Ride Warriors.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.